Hello, I'm Maria Hall Brown, and this is LA Currents. The LA Fire Department became a paid career employment opportunity in February of 1886. Back then, they would go for days, weeks without a fire. Well, lots has changed since then, but celebrating the rich history of the LA Fire Department. I'm delighted to be here at the LA Fire Department Museum, and I am joined by the president of the LA Fire Department Historical Society, retired Captain Jim Finn. Nice to have you with me today.
Thank you, Maria.
And nice to be in such an incredibly rich environment.
Yeah, you're right. It is quite an important structure. This was built as a result of contract because the city of Hollywood wanted to be annexed by Los Angeles.
Okay.
Los Angeles had water, Hollywood didn't. So part of the contract was that they build a civic center for them. And this whole block of land that we're on was what they chose to build the civic center. And they built a fire station where we're sitting, the police station, which is behind us, the city offices down on Fountain, and a receiving hospital.
Okay.
All the other three buildings have either been torn down and replaced, so this is the only existing original building from 1930.
1930, so this is Fire Station 27.
27, right.
Okay.
An active station for 62 years. They moved out of here in July of 1992, and the reason that the city actually put forth a bond issue, which was passed, and they built 15 fire stations to replace 17 that did not meet seismic standards. This was one of them. And in January of 1994, the Northridge earthquake heavily damaged this station. So they were right, it didn't meet seismic standards. And thanks to our late, great city councilman Tom LaBonge, he talked to the city engineers, and they decided to put this building on the earthquake bond because it was already an historic building. And so they put it on the bond and repaired it, and we were able to use it as our museum after that.
Very, very cool. Well, so it is a museum.
Yes.
And it became a museum because there is such a rich history here with the LA Fire Department. But when you were telling me earlier when you first were going to open it, what were you going to put in it?
We didn't know. We knew we wanted fire apparatus and memorabilia, but we didn't have anything. 4 days before our grand opening, we got apparatus to put on the floor here, and that's because Griffith Park was changing what they were doing in Travel Town, and they were going to get rid of their fire department exhibits, and so we got all of it. 3 of the pieces sit here on the floor today, and one of them one of them was originally horse-drawn and is now motorized. That was done in 1919, and then one of the pieces that's sitting here is a 1937 American LaFrance pumper. It was in use as a frontline apparatus for 21 years. And then it went into reserve status for 3 years. And in 1961, it was given to Travel Town to put in their exhibit.
Okay.
40 years later, they gave it back to us. And 5 years ago, we had it restored. And so here it sits on our floor after 84 years of city service.
Well, it's now packed in here.
Yes.
With such an incredible array of, so the history of the LA Fire Department, as I keep saying, it has some really interesting components to it. So what are some of the most interesting elements that you've been able to glean and bring in here that would fascinate even people who don't know about the fire department?
Well, actually the earliest of our apparatus is a Hayes aerial, and it's from the early 1880s. Daniel Hayes was somebody that worked for Amos Geig Company, who made steamers back in New York, and he came out to San Francisco to do some work on their steamers, decided he liked it out west and stayed, and in 1868 came up with the patent for this aerial ladder that was much improved over what they were using. And he and a partner put it together. We have one of the very few, if not the only, existing Hayes aerial left in the world. And his three different sides of his family, great-great-grandchildren, have come here to see it, and they have brought us copies of the original patents that he and his partner put forth to build it. So that's certainly one of them. The steamer that's sitting right behind you is from 1887, the LA Fire Department. That was one of our earliest purchases when we became a paid department. Crown, there's a 1963 Crown pumper sitting here that was one of only two built for our fire department. They were pretty much a matched pair and used in the industrial area just south of downtown Los Angeles. So we have that. And our water tower was built in, it's a Gorder water tower. Henry Gorder was another person that worked and built things for San Francisco. It seems like anything San Francisco got, we wanted to copy it. So we had Henry Gorder build one for us in 1905. It's an amazing piece of apparatus. It's all hydraulically operated. So once you started pumping to it with water, you could control everything with hydraulic valves. And obviously built in 1905, it was horse-drawn. In 1921, it became the very last piece of apparatus that we motorized. Wow. And it was done right in our shops in downtown Los Angeles, actually in East LA. And that ended the horse-drawn era for LA City Fire Department.
All right, so we were talking about this a little bit earlier. So there were obviously horses involved.
Yes.
So were there horses stabled here?
Not in this station.
In this one, okay.
No.
This one was built later than that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So there were horses stabled in other stations.
Right.
So you actually sort of rely on the kindness of strangers when it comes to, donations of these sorts of things. But also, this is a whole volunteer organization, is it not?
That's correct. Yeah.
So what is the Historical Society and who's part of it, and where's the genesis of that?
Well, the majority of our members are either active or retired LAFD firefighters. Now, we certainly do have other people. I just, about 2 weeks ago, got a lifetime membership from somebody that lives in the state of Washington. But he grew up in Los Angeles. He still has fondness, obviously, for Los Angeles, and he's a joiner. He joins organizations. And so he saw on our website, and actually he sent in his life membership, and it got returned by the post office. So he called, or sent an email actually, which I picked up and called him back because he didn't know if we were still operational or what, since he got it back. And it was just a postal error. But we have people from all walks of life who do join our historical society, but by and large, it's either active or retired firefighters.
Well, you're a retired firefighter, as I mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
So you were, a captain.
I was. Yep.
And what drew you to this whole world to begin with? Because it really is almost. It definitely. It wasn't just a job for you. It's something that you've held on to for a long time.
It's a calling, that's for sure. And early in my life, my family knew some other people that were firefighters, and so I suppose that's where the original seed was planted. My brother came on the fire department in 1962 and served almost 45 years, just shy of 45 years. And in 1968, I came out of the Marine Corps and followed in his footsteps and came on the fire department.
What are some of the things that you saw? What are some of the memories that you can't erase whether you want to or not, and what are some of the things that you really are fond of thinking about?
Well, the things that, I suppose the things that you can't erase out of your memory were the things that happened to kids. Either early in my career, the city council decided they wanted the fire department to take over the ambulance service, and so they started in the station that I worked in. They were already doing it in the San Fernando Valley, but they wanted to take it over the metropolitan area also. Right. So the station I was working in was in Watts, and that's where they decided to put the first ambulance, and so I was assigned to it. And traffic accidents and other, fires where kids are either injured or killed.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah, that stays with you.
But that also makes me think about the fact that, firefighters don't just fight fires. I mean, there's a broad range of what they are asked to do, required to do. I mean, there's literally an ambulance over your shoulder that I can see myself. So, what's the scope of a firefighter's life, and how is that reflected in this museum?
Well, pretty much everything. And especially on the weekends, no other city agencies, not very many of them are open on the weekends. Mm-hmm. And so people call who's open, and we're open, and we go to see if there's, if it's something that we can take care of. And if it is, we take care of it. If it's not, we try and get help for them, whatever they need. So.
And you can see that in here, I would imagine, in all these different things. I mean, the different utilitarian and emotional purposes of all these items.
And a lot of these items that you see in here are the result of something that somebody has responded to, some firefighter has responded to, and they didn't have what they needed to properly take care of it, and so they designed and built it. And we have a lot of tools that are actually named after firefighters. Blake four-way valve and Schultz shut-off, those are named after LA firefighters that designed these things for us to use.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
How does one go from being a firefighter who needs something to creating that something to actually getting it named after them? I mean, is there a process?
No, there's not a process. Okay. And they don't always get named after them.
Where's the Jim Finn of things?
Yeah, we don't have that. It's just some of the things that go into bigger use. I mean, there's departments all over the nation that use something like the Blake four-way valve. It's been improved on because we now use bigger hose than we used when that was built. So now it's not called the Blake four-way valve, it's called the large diameter four-way valve.
Okay.
Because we use bigger hose. But,
got it.
We have lots of things that were created by firefighters but don't have their name attached to them.
Right.
So.
Yes, the cat ladder. No, I'm kidding. There is a sister museum to this.
Yes.
Down in the harbor.
Correct.
Again, talking about the scale and scope of what the LA Fire Department really does. So what is down in the Harbor Museum? Because this museum that we're sitting in right now, I should qualify, is we're in the heart of Hollywood right now.
Right.
So what's down in San Pedro?
San Pedro has a lot of the same things that we have, but it's more marine themed since they're in the Port of Los Angeles. They have a lot of things that were used down there that are unique to harbor firefighting. And so that's what they have.
There's a boat?
There is a boat not in the museum, but hopefully it'll have its own museum. It was the Ralph J. Scott was put into service in October of 1925. It was the longest serving apparatus in LA Fire Department history. It was in active service for almost 78 years. It was replaced in 2003, was taken out of the water, put on land, and our volunteers started working on it.
Wow.
They were losing progress because of the marine environment down there. So the Harbor Department put a tent over it for us, and if you can imagine, when I say tent, that's kind of misleading. The boat is 99 feet long, and so you had to have more room than that.
To be able to work on it.
And also 50 feet high. So it's quite a structure in itself, and the boat is 99% completed in its rehabilitation now, just a few more things to hang on it. And so we're hoping that the Harbor Department had a museum planned for that boat. Somewhere during the planning stage for that, we lost our museum out of their plans. So we have an option we're trying to put forward to them to improve the tent that's there right now. It can be made into a museum, and for much less money than building a new building. So we're hoping maybe we can appeal to them for that, and that boat will end up with its own museum.
Well, awareness is the first step.
Right.
So that's what we have to do, is do that. You know, this has been such an unusual year for any organization, any museum, of course, not being able to have patrons come in and not getting the word out. But you've taken that time and actually utilized it in a very, stalwart way, and you've got new things that you've been able to acquire and to work on over this past year, have you not?
Yes, we have. Yeah, we've had donations have still continued to come in. In fact, tomorrow I'm going to go and pick one up for a past member that died about a week ago, retired member that died a week ago, and he has a unique story himself. He was a Korean War veteran. He was a Navy corpsman, and he came on the city ambulance service in 1955. That's the one that we absorbed in 1970.
Okay.
We absorbed the city ambulance service and brought it into the fire department. And he then became a paramedic when the paramedic program started about 3 years later, and retired in 1985 as a senior paramedic. And so unfortunately he just passed away, and he left his entire memorabilia collection to us in his will. So I'm going to go out and pick it up tomorrow, and we'll be displaying that.
Wow.
On the walls in this museum are some giant reproductions of Currier and Ives lithographs. 4 of them are 6 feet by 8 feet, and we had one that was damaged and we never got displayed. It was very large, 8 feet by 12 feet. So we spent a couple of months working on that and getting it installed upstairs, which was a trick in itself, getting it upstairs. And so that's now on display. And yeah, there's and a lot of repairs and cleanup and sorting things out have gone on over the last year. So
you mentioned the generous patron who has offered you, what he gave you in his will, but there's also a very poignant part of this facility that memorializes officers who have fallen in the line of duty, which is an incredibly important part of, honoring their career and their dedication and their sacrifice. The memorial wall is a very dynamic part of this.
Yeah. Back in 2000, we weren't even open yet, but we knew we were coming in here.
Right.
And our fire chief's wife, Liz Bamatri, was the prime mover behind the memorial. We'd been a fire department at that time for 114 years and had no memorial for fallen firefighters. Every year we had a memorial service, but it was held on the south lawn of City Hall at the Cenotaph, which was there to honor LA firefighters that went to fight in World War II. And there's no names or anything on this, it's just something that was put there back in 1944 to honor them. So we needed an appropriate place to honor those people. And so it was through her input, and I mentioned Tom LaBonge earlier. He was part of that group also. And Liz actually went back to Minnesota to have those statues made that are out there.
And I don't mean to interrupt, but I think it's important. The statues really tell their own story. It's a really important tribute to the type of people who become firefighters.
Right. We did something that most fire departments don't do if they have memorial statues. Most fire departments put a breathing apparatus face piece on them. So with that face piece covering them, you don't know who they are. You don't know what they look like. We wanted to do something a little different. We used 5 active firefighters to pose for those, and with 5 statues, we did as much as we could to show our diversity with ethnicity and gender. And there's one thing also different about those is that when you look at the helmets, there's 5 different numbers on the helmets. You wouldn't have a firefighting crew with 5 different numbers on their helmets. They'd be from the same station. Sure. But we were doing the same thing. We highlighted 5 different areas of the city with those station numbers. So you can see the gender, you can see the ethnicity, and then they're there in front of our memorial wall that has all of the people listed that died in the line of duty.
And a yearly honorarium for them, et cetera. There's also an element to this museum which I think is really important to talk about. There's an educational component. Mm-hmm. So what is the Institute and how is that utilized with the history?
Bill Roland, who it's named for, was a benefactor of this museum. He was a retired firefighter. Sadly, last year he passed away. And he was a Medal of Valor recipient for a rescue that he made during Mandeville Canyon mudslide in 1969. It injured him and actually prohibited him from coming back to work. So his career was cut short. But he went on, and his life took a different turn, went into real estate and investing, and he ended up making a considerable amount of money over his second career. Mm-hmm. And gave back. And so he had funded a lot here in this museum. The educational center is named after him, and what we're doing is trying to teach children and adults fire and life safety.
On a personal level?
Yes.
So you don't need perhaps the assistance of a firefighter, but how to take care of yourself before professional aid arrives.
Correct, yeah.
There's also a fun element. You can actually have a party here.
We do, and we tried kids' birthday parties, but those did not work for us. But we have had other events here. We've had retirement dinners for firefighters. We've had weddings, both upstairs and out in front. Mm-hmm. And we've had we have our own memorial service every year to honor the firefighters that are on that wall and the people that have died during the year. Right. But we've also had memorial services here for an individual member that has passed away, and that's where they want to have the service to honor them.
There's the what, that's visually fascinating, the stories are interesting, the people involved, have a long and interesting story to tell. So there's the what, but there's the why. Why is this place here, and why is it important for us to know that it's here, and why should we think about all of these stories and understand the history of the LA Fire Department?
Well, history is obviously very important in whatever walk of life you're in, or just life itself. If you don't know where you're coming from or where you've been, then you really don't know where you're going. And it's kind of funny how this job in particular, the more things change, the more they're the same, it seems like. You know, and I'll just give you an example here. This steamer that's right behind you, there's a couple of valves at the back of it. You know, this really carried no water. This thing was just there to pump water. So you had to have a water supply, and then the boiler would create steam so that it could push that water under pressure out through hose lines. And it was run by coal. And so before it left the station, or while it was in the station, it was always plugged in to their station boiler. So it had hot water circulating through it. When they left the station to go on a call, they could start with water at around 130 degrees instead of 60 or 70 degrees. So it made the process a little faster.
Efficient, yes.
Yeah. And that, because that hot water was running through the hoses that went there, that's often where you'd find the station mascot sleeping, is right under there, because it was warm. So today we have diesel apparatus. It's plugged into the wall. It's heated by electricity. The engine's heated to make, it doesn't have anything to do with the pumping, but diesels don't work very well unless they're warmed up. So we've got the same thing. You know,
Right.
we had it plugged in to the station either way, back when it was horse-drawn, or now that it's diesel. So.
You mentioned a mascot, and we don't have very much time, but there's a poignant story about, and I keep using that word poignant, I need to come up with a new adjective. Your dog,
Wilshire the fire dog.
He passed earlier this year.
Yeah.
Any opportunity to have a Wilshire exhibit in here?
Sure. You know, he performed here on Fire Service Day or for different events. Wilshire would be here. I have to tell you that when I worked at Fire Station 29, which is near here, I was still working, and that's when Wilshire came to us. And so he was our dog. He found a spot that he liked, and it happened to be
at your feet.
At my feet under the desk, and until he was too big to lay there, that's where you'd find him most of the day. So yeah, Wilshire was a great dog, and you know, I have a lot of admiration for him, and I've purchased a paver that will go out in the plaza for him. So, and you know, I hadn't thought of some type of a display in here until I read your list of questions, but I think that's something that we can look forward to.
Well, he too was a hero because he brought attention and love to everyone. So.
Yeah.
Well, if people want to get more information about this museum and when they can come and when it's going to be, you know, more open and it's free, which is the best part.
Right.
What's the best website?
LAFDmuseum.org.
All right. Well, Jim, this has been an ultimate delight, and this is a fascinating place, and I cannot emphasize that you need to get a lot of people in here to support everything that you're doing.
Thank you, Maria. I appreciate you coming.
Thanks. And that's a wrap on this LA Currents.